It's Smooth 98.1. Love music, love life. This is Freshly Pressed. We have the analysts in, and we're looking at the news stories that are making the headlines across the country. As always, we'd love for you to be a part of the conversation, so please let us know your thoughts. WhatsApp number 0809 440 You can also tweet at Smooth981. The hashtag is Freshly Pressed 981. We're streaming live on our YouTube channel, Smooth981, and you can also post a comment on there as well. The analysts are in. It's Bozimo and Joseph Obari. Good morning.
Good morning, Zibby. Good morning, Joseph. Good morning to everyone listening. Happy Friday.
Good morning, Zibby, President Zibby, and our loving listeners and everybody, wherever you are. Good morning.
Good morning and welcome. Yes, I like the three of us are on the same page with that. All right, our first headline comes from Punch. Fuel supply, 9,000 marketers may lose licenses. Seek FG's intervention.
So we're learning from IPMAN, Independent Petroleum Marketers Association, that they are urging the NNPC to extend its final deadline for the licenses to be renewed from April 15th, which already passed, till July. Reading the story, it appears, among other things, that there's fundamentally an administrative problem. Evidently, out of about 15,000 licenses to be renewed, 9,000 of them have been renewed, but have not been released. And beyond that, for the balance, if they are not renewed, those marketers will not have access to a certain portal that enables them buy and, of course, trade in petroleum products. So you have to ask yourself, how come such a critical sector of Nigeria's economy? Fuel supply is one thing. We've talked ad nauseum about importing fuel, refineries non-functional. Now, quote unquote, ordinary to sign paper, NNPC appears not to have the capacity, ability, or willingness to do. So the question is, what does NNPC do right in Nigeria? What has NNPC been able to do right? I'm still sitting here talking about that refinery in Port Harcourt that was supposed to be functional in December, then February, then April. We're now in May. And at the end of April, they told us they're building a new refinery inside that refinery. What, I ask, does or has NNPC done well to be admired as the prime oil management company of Nigeria? We don't produce oil. IOCs produce oil. We sit down and watch like it's a Netflix film. We are not an oil producing nation. We sit on resources, and for whatever reason, we have these endless cycles of turnaround maintenance and junkets all over the world, but sign the papers. You've already, according to them, approved 9,000. Release those? No. So is it that they just enjoy creating bottlenecks? Are bottlenecks a form of currency which you can now trade for graft? Is a question I'm asking. I don't see why, as you sign one, you don't release it. Why do you create a backlog of 9,000? Then beyond that, they're saying if those express portals close, then the members will not be able to trade. Remember, this fuel business is what some people use to take care of their lives, their employees, and all that. Is NNPC quite aware of the strife that they will contribute to an already faltering economy? I don't see the sense of responsibility or any sense of urgency on the part of NNPC and all that. And it remains a problem. I would hope that this letter being made, let's say, open now in the media, might spur the NNPC to get up off their proverbial butts and do what they need to do to at least release those 9,000 licenses. Maybe consider extending the deadline, because evidently, if you have not released 9,000 as of April 15th, I don't know what the chances are that you can release the balance before that July that is being called for. Their processes simply have to be reformed. This is not a good look. It is not a proper performance by what should be one of the most advanced organizations in Nigeria. Recently made a public company, for that matter. So I mean, I look at it and I'm troubled at just the sheer litany of ineptitude that seems to be on display. Maybe NNPC has a perspective that they need to share, but from this story, they just have not seemed to have done what they need to do.
All right, and let us know your thoughts. The WhatsApp number is 0809 444 981. Let's move on to the next headline, and this one comes from Daily Trust. Bandits kill 17 and abduct 5 in Kaduna, Sokoto communities.
Well, the stories never end. What we are doing is just body count. That's what we are doing. Because there's not been anything that suggests that the bandits are being contained and that they are not running riots all over the place, killing people. Nothing. There is nothing to prove that. Because what we get every week, every few days, we hear they've killed people here, they've killed people there. So what is the solution? That's the question that is staring at us. Nothing is being done actually to the vulnerable communities are there, distant from law enforcement and all that. So they are easy prey. And that's simply what it is. People, bandits, these so-called bandits go there. And recently, government officials have been saying around the axis of Sokoto and Kebbi and so on, the illegal miners are actually funding some young people who are now on the loose. So it's a complex mix of problems. But how do they defy our capability to contain? That is the critical question. So after this attack, they may invite the service chiefs to the National Assembly and ask them questions, and then they make promises, and then we go away, and then the next thing we get the body count again of how many persons have been killed or how many persons have been abducted. So there's no apparent solution to the problem. Nothing is being done. The people are left to their fate, apparently. Or even a call to the police tells you that we want to get information or that we get more information. So how does a nation function in this manner? How? What kind of nation functions in this manner? Where people get killed, nobody is concerned, government it's got to a point where no government officials don't even respond to such incidents anymore. They don't make comments about them. Unless maybe when they are writing speeches somewhere, making a speech somewhere, they talk about it in figures. So we are just turning out statistics of people who are dying. That's all. I don't know how long we are going to continue.
AB?
19 people today, 7 the other day, members of each of these people has a name, an identity, had a dream, has a family perhaps, and they just get swept under the rug. It is so awful, and it can never be normalized. These people, I always say it could be any single one of us. If I had the privilege of having a project to do in Sokoto, I could be there. So it sometimes seems distant, but we share a certain part of the firmament on earth. We share a country. One of us passing away needlessly like this should definitely affect all of us. And technologies exist. How are these people, like Joseph said, able to seemingly operate without let or containment? They seem to move at will, sometimes in large numbers, other times not. And then it goes further. Sometimes people may be injured. If a person is injured, how do they get health care shortly thereafter to perhaps preserve their lives? There are lots of pieces to it, but I refuse to believe that the Nigerian security forces are incapable. There are two parts. There's sabotage and there's complicity. And we must discover which of these is at the root of this and end it. Nigerians' lives must be prioritized. No conditionality. It's a very sad story to wake up to every so often, one day or the other, you hear this.
And Francis from Oja, I've got a message here. He says, I am tired of the Nigerian fuel problem every month. What would it take the government for us to start up with the electric vehicles? And at least maybe we would need less petroleum products only for our generators only. Adegboyega says, what do we expect from an NNPC under the leadership of Mele Kyari? He's been forever in the NNPC without transparency, accountability, and sincerity. So what do we expect from such an organization? One would expect the president that is just coming in as the new president to change such a man, but instead he retained him and even extended his tenure. So this suffering will continue because we have an NNPC boss that isn't capable and that has overstayed his time in NNPC. JP says NNPC needs to be run better. License renewals should be on her portal. Upload necessary documents, pay and print Shikina, but where there is chaos, there is gain. 100% government ownership is not okay, hence the malaise. All right, let's move on to the nation. Federal government's tough policies are necessary to revive economy, says Shatima.
He was a guest at the Second Chronicle Roundtable held at the Continental Hotel in Abuja, and he was speaking about the economic policies that the president has taken. He's spoken, of course, about the subsidy removal, saying we had far exceeded our capacity to borrow and even pay back. If you had 100,000 naira, you needed to pay back 111,500. This was really towering. What struck me or strikes me, present continuous, is it's so easy to identify the challenges and the problems, but at no point in the speech do I hear them placing responsibility anywhere. They just shy away from the fact that this national tragedy of borrowing came up from the former administration. He also goes ahead to talk about how there are cabals who are sabotaging the country and so on and so forth. I also fail to see how these people remain impossible to identify. Are cabals in Nigeria the only ghosts in the country? Or are these people who have transactions that can be identified? See how quickly the country identifies certain organizations and with detains two of their leaders. And the other day, those financial institutions that are online, I won't call their names, where they are locking down bank accounts on there. They're able to go after what I would consider to be the relatively small fry. But you keep talking about these cabals like a shadowy set of people. Is it that the cabals serve some of your purposes or have been your benefactors in the past and therefore you are unable or unwilling to go after them? If you truly are talking about how, because there was a very poetic thing, being a leader in a time of crisis is like being at the helm of a ship. Well, the nation spelled the word hem, H-E-M, which is embarrassing, but setting that aside, at the helm of a ship and making decisions that, very poetic, good language. The bottom line, if you are really trying to root out the problem, I'll make it domestic. If I'm sitting here on this show right now and a cockroach somehow appeared on my camera, I would stop what I'm doing and terminate it. I would not say cockroaches are bad and shouldn't, I would end that problem. How come you identify the cabals, you identify the saboteurs of the economy, you say that these people exist, and with the magnificent resources of Nigeria at a physical and forensic level, you cannot call these people out and prosecute them because people are innocent until proven guilty. Identify them, indict them, and prosecute them, and thereby free the country. So, and you keep talking about sacrifice. I do not see the sacrifices being made by the ruling class. It seems to be always that the ordinary Nigerian is called upon to sacrifice. Nigerians are ready, willing, and able to sacrifice literally anything to get a better country. But we need to see the same energy being asked of ordinary Nigerians, being demonstrated in the red, blue, and pink, or whatever chambers that they all exist in. I need to see that those in leadership positions also are sacrificing, not piling on more and more allowances, SUVs, bulletproof and non-bulletproof, and in fact, prayers into their mailboxes. That does not look like the kind of environment where I'll be happy to make the sacrifice. Of course, I'm forced to make it because I have no control over the levers of power, but you create resentment. And the risk, and what we definitely do not want to see, is when such things break out in the wrong direction. So he spoke well, but I just feel that a missing part of all these kind of statements is identifying the so-called saboteurs and dealing with them legally and decisively.
All right, thanks for that, AB. Let's move on to some of the messages. Anthony says, another name for the NNPC is the more you look, the less you see. Everything seems shady. Everything seems monopolized and operated without the interest of the Nigerian people. Yet, the magician is left to permanently head the organization. The beginning and end of frustration is to hope for anything from these people. Adewale says since last week, people have been queuing for fuel daily and even fighting over the queues, but everything seems normal. Kidnappings and insecurities and everything seems normal. Hunger and inflation, but nothing seems bad. We've normalized bad governance and it seems we can't do anything about it. It is sad. Ajayi says it's unfortunate that the NNPCL is allowed to continue its ineptitude that continues to inflict so much hardship on the people. It seems no semblance of governance is going on in the country right now. You're still listening to Freshly Pressed on Smooth 98.1. We'll continue with the headlines shortly. Stay with us. Susie.
Sure.
It's Freshly Pressed on Smooth 98.1. It's Zibby here, and our analyst this morning, AB Bozimo, Joseph Obari. We're looking at the news headlines, and of course, would love to hear your thoughts. The WhatsApp number 0809 440 981. From Punch, government borrows 11 trillion naira via bonds, treasury bills in 4 months. Joseph?
Well, it's becoming inevitable that Nigeria has to borrow because apparently we're not producing enough crude oil to sell to meet even our quota. In fact, our quota, we have even dropped below the low quota we have been trying to meet, the quota we're trying to meet. We've dropped beyond that in April itself. So we are not even able to produce enough oil to sell at the time oil prices are advantageous to us. So what do you have to do? And then, of course, we are not balancing revenue from crude oil through non-crude, exports. The result is that you have a deficit budget. And then what do? You have to borrow money. And treasury bills and bonds are about the safest way in which you can do so. My concern is not that we are borrowing, but what are we doing with the money we are borrowing? That is a critical question. When in a country, you borrow money and steal it. You borrow money, which will be paid by generations to come, and then you divert the money, you use it for whatever it is, and it's still, even when you are earmarked for projects, it is laced with corruption that end up in people's private pocket. And like AB said, these people are like ghosts that cannot be tracked. You cannot prosecute anybody. You can't recover the money from them. Then it's a sad development. So all over the world, yes, government borrow. I mean, individuals when they borrow. But the point is that, are you borrowing for a beneficial purpose or for for a profit, something that can bring a return. All infrastructures in this country are decaying. The roads are not motorable. I mean, we've seen pictures from Benin and all over the place of roads that cannot be maintained. Yet we are borrowing money. That's the irony of the Nigerian situation. That is the irony of the Nigerian situation. It's so pathetic. So yeah, analysis figures are coming out. Data, yes, we borrowed 11.1 trillion. Yes. Where are we putting this money? And what are we doing to stem the tide of borrowing? What actually are we doing to reduce how much we are borrowing and be able to create a balance in the economy? So those are the critical questions. The CBN, yes, through some policies, we've seen some advantages in what they are doing, but how sustainable are they on the long term? And how are they going to affect the life of the individual? Because generations unborn are being steeped and their futures are being mortgaged by every debt that we incur.
Thank you, Joseph. Let's look at some messages. Adegboyega says, this government has said they're not going to probe the past governments, but the truth is, without digging into the past, we aren't going to move forward. A lot went down in the past government that really put this nation into what we are experiencing today. Joseph Menu says, our leaders are excellent orators at every event to address people. The government and elites are just the bane of hardship, inflation, economic downturns, etc. Imagine talking about cabals as if they are invisible. The NNPC, Kiari was always telling Nigerians that the petrol could last for a year. Every time there's scarcity, such lying people should be jailed. The day the government starts being sensitive and let their conscience lead them, the country will be better. Angel says the problem with the borrowing that is largely for recurrent expenditure as opposed to production or infrastructural development, it's not sustainable. Let's move on to the next headline, and this one comes from Daily Trust. Nigeria imports $8 billion steel yearly, and this is according to the minister. AB?
You know, the Minister of Steel Development has mentioned that figure, and he has said, in order to stem that, we need for the Ajaokuta Steel Company to work. Honestly, Ajaokuta Steel Company hurts my heart. If you've ever traveled by road between the south and the north towards Abuja, and you pass the absolutely spectacular, magnificent grounds and complex of what you can see of the Ajaokuta Steel Company, and if you imagine what the vision was, what it could have been to make Nigeria one of the leading steel producing nations, and you observe what now is the waste, then this amount, $8 billion, will hurt you even more. We've heard stories about the input for the steel being a certain type and it wasn't made. Look, whatever the case, we're 64 years old now. We're not a kid. There should by now have been a solution. And you may not solve it all at once, but there is a facility in place. By now, it should have been possible to address turning away from whatever the faults may have been perceived before and going on to look at, we're talking about coastal roads being done in concrete. Concrete will have some steel in it. Every building you see has steel reinforcement. Steel is used in so many other aspects and elements of construction, fabrication, and everything. If we're importing all that, we are subject to the vagaries, first of all, of the forex. We're subject to logistic challenges, which we've heard in our petroleum sector. But if we're producing these things here, imagine the employment itself. That's always the first thing I think when I think of the word production, the employment potential. And additionally, the fact that those products will be available here, you test them here, you improve the processes, over time, you take your place validly among the committee of steel producing nations. So he's saying, look, it looks like they have to pay $500 million to the concessionaires to break a former agreement, and he has written a 10-year plan for Ajaokuta to be made good and all that. There we talk about funding is a problem. Funding is a problem. but we don't seem to lack funds to import SUVs. That's what irks me. We seem to always have a problem with funding for education, funding for things that will benefit the masses, but we don't lack for 1 second funding for irrelevant things like making our leaders have all sorts of payments that make them higher paid than most other people in productive nations. So it's not a matter of funding, it's a matter of prioritizing. We refuse to prioritize use of, like Joseph said, all these loans and these things, how have they converted into better lives for Nigerians? We heard in a few past days how states are now getting much more allocation in Naira. Is there any state of anyone listening where they're actually enjoying what seems to be a better life, 2-3 times the former allocation? Is there anything you are enjoying better in your life? So we need to look both at the federal government and at our state governors. But to this narrow story, there's a plan. Can we execute? In any project managed endeavor, you can break it down. What are the important milestones? How can we see the end of the tunnel from the start and begin to progress in the right direction? That's the question. Everything else is empty speech making, irrelevant to progress in Nigeria.
Well,
Right,
to me, I think
yes.
Ajokuta has continued to be a national disgrace. And if there's anything that has epitomized our corruption, it's Ajokuta, because you can't explain that you got a plant to about 98% completion and it was abandoned. The conception of this project began in the 60s, when the feasibilities were started by British and Soviets and so on, and then actual construction. And then we got to 90-something%. And then it was abandoned for over 40-something years. We are still talking. The minister, in fact, at the session with the House of Representatives, was saying that he's still at the stage of trying to figure out a solution. The minister is saying he's at the stage where he's trying to find solution. So why you make the minister? Why are you there? Because I would think that one of the big elephant in the room in steel production in Nigeria, anything steel, is Ajokuta. And that would have given, if it means assembling the best brains, you will try to figure out. You've gone to China to bring, we are looking for money and this. So what was this session all about? Lamentations, session of lamentation. Everybody is complaining. The House of Reps members are complaining. Minister is also complaining. So what am I supposed to do as a citizen? I'm supposed to applaud them for not being clueless on a major problem as such as this. So I think our leaders are really, really not helping this country at all. And that's an understatement.
Bereft of creative ideas.
All right. We've got about a minute to go. Joseph, let's see if we can do this in just about that time. Benue government to pull down over 800 houses, shanties on waterways and drainages. And this one comes from Vanguard.
I think it's a problem all over the country, cities and so on, that organizations such as this urban development, whatever board, they don't enforce the plans of their cities. So why do you allow people set up businesses in the wrong places, wait for years, decades, then you come one day and then you clear them? These people are struggling. I saw the video yesterday. Most of them, that's the only means of livelihood. You're not providing alternatives for them. You're not saying, okay, let us find somewhere for you where you can go. You just send bulldozers and clear these things where even their wares in it and you don't care. Okay, we made an announcement on radio and so on. But does it address the challenge the people face, the economic livelihood they have that you're destroying? So enforce, because in some parts of the world, you cannot even put a piece of wood on the ground without the authorities approving it. So how is it possible that people are able to even construct permanent structures in places they ought not to? And there are government agencies that are supposed to ensure that that doesn't happen. And when they've done so, after some decades, you now come and then you now act and then put people in more penury. So I think there should be a different approach to resolving that. First of all is enforcement. And then where you're having to take actions like this, that should, even if it's a token, that should be something to give to those people or find them alternatives so where they can do their businesses.
Okay, okay, Abby, go ahead.
Very briefly, unplanned development is a bane. It leads to slum conditions and it leads to poverty. It always baffles me how these authorities come after the fact. It's like movies. Oh, it's always after the protagonist and the main victim have finished fighting that you hear the police sirens. How come the organizations didn't prevent this development in the first place? But it's important to clear those waterways because flooding is imminent. We don't know what this year is going to be like again. And we know Benue certainly suffered, Makurdi suffered from flooding. So yes, clear the waterways. Do not wait for this development to be done and give them alternatives like Joseph said. Unplanned development is the main problem. And those planning authorities should be held responsible.
All right, let's look at the messages. We can only take a couple. Abdegboyega says pulling down shanties is good, but do they plan good, affordable housing for the people? Ibrahim Zakari says the average Nigerian is tired and sick with sacrifices. How sure are we that even if we sacrifice our lives, Nigeria will be great? If only the late Obafemi Awolowo, Nnamdi Azikiwe, Tafawa Balewa, falling heroes that sacrificed to free Nigeria from the colonial masters were to wake up from the dead and see where we are today, they would be full of regrets. They will weep. It's a shame a country blessed with so much has people living in penury. That is it for Freshly Pressed this morning. Thank you so much for listening. Thanks for your messages, and special thanks to our amazing analysts, as always, who do a brilliant job. Thank you, AB, and thank you, Joseph.
Thank
you. President Zibby, agree, disagree, hit me up at AB Bozimo on all platforms. Have a wonderful weekend.
Everybody, wonderful weekend. Enjoy yourself and stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you. Those are the words I will live by this weekend, Joseph. Thank you, AB. That is it for Freshly Pressed. Do stay with us. There is